In 1941, the United States entered World War II without one clear civilian organization to run spying, sabotage, and secret analysis. Information sat in separate corners of the government, and the military guarded its own channels. The country faced enemies who treated intelligence as a weapon, not a side task. In that gap, one man pushed a blunt argument. America needed a central place to plan and act in secret. That man was William Wild Bill Donovan, a decorated veteran and hard-driving organizer who moved easily between politics, law, and the world of influence. He pressed leaders in Washington to think beyond conventional war. Winning battles required knowing what the enemy planned, disrupting it before it happened, and coordinating that work across agencies. Donovan did not ask for a small office. He asked for a new capability. In 1942, Donovan secured approval to build the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. It started as an experiment under pressure, assembled quickly because the war demanded it. The mission sounded simple but carried big consequences. Gather intelligence, analyze it for decision makers, and run operations that regular forces could not. The United States suddenly tried to create a modern spy service while already fighting a global war. The new OSS moved fast because the war did not wait. It recruited wherever talent appeared, not just from the military. Lawyers, scholars, linguists, journalists, engineers, and adventurous outsiders joined alongside uniformed officers. The goal sounded simple: find information, break enemy systems, and support resistance. In practice, it meant building a workforce that mixed brains and nerve. This became a different kind of wartime unit. That mix needed shaping, so the OSS built training programs almost overnight. Recruits learned how to handle secrets, read maps, use radios, and move without attracting attention. They practiced sabotage, coded messages, and the basics of running an agent. At the same time, planners created specialized branches so people could focus on one job and do it well. The OSS started to resemble a machine. Then the OSS pushed outward. It opened overseas stations to collect reports, recruit local sources, and connect with allies already fighting in occupied territory. Back home, analysts sorted raw scraps into summaries commanders could act on, turning rumor into intelligence. Another arm prepared covert action, not just observation. For the first time, the United States operated a large, organized system built for secrecy, disruption, and analysis. In 1943, the OSS stopped being just a headquarters and became a field organization. Small teams moved into occupied Europe and across parts of Asia with one job: build leverage where regular armies could not reach. They slipped in by parachute, by boat, and through border routes that failed as often as they worked. Every mission depended on timing, local trust, and silence. When any one piece broke, people died. Behind enemy lines, OSS officers tried to turn scattered resistance into usable force. They brought radios, money, weapons, and instructions, then asked part-time fighters to act like an army, hit rail lines, sabotage bridges, and gather intelligence on troop movements. It sounded straightforward. It never was. Partisans had rival agendas, informers watched for rewards, and reprisals followed quickly. The OSS learned that supporting guerrillas multiplied both impact and risk. To keep these networks alive, the OSS leaned on tradecraft, coded messages, dead drops, forged papers, and careful compartmenting so one arrest did not unravel everything. Secret supply lines mattered as much as courage. Aircraft dropped crates at night, couriers carried microfilm, and operators improvised when plans collapsed. Some agents vanished into prisons. Some local helpers were executed after raids. In 1943, the OSS proved its value and paid for it in human lives. By 1944, the OSS did not just chase secrets, it tried to shape what people believed. The logic sounded simple. If war depended on morale and confusion, then words and rumors became weapons. OSS planners mapped out deception schemes, planted false clues, and fed the enemy stories meant to pull troops the wrong way. It went beyond the battlefield. Influence reached into politics, resistance movements, and public opinion. Psychological warfare grew into a system. The OSS produced leaflets, broadcasts, and messages designed to weaken enemy confidence and strengthen friendly forces. Sometimes it supported real movements, sometimes it exaggerated them. The goal stayed the same: make opponents doubt their leaders, their plans, even their chances of survival. But each successful trick carried a cost. Once you practiced deception as policy, it became harder to draw a clean line between information and manipulation. Inside a democracy, that line mattered. The OSS operated in secret, and secrecy made oversight thin and arguments easy to postpone. Supporters focused on results: fewer American deaths, faster victories, disrupted enemy defenses. Critics worried about the habits being formed. Propaganda worked, and that was the problem. If the government learned to steer narratives abroad, it could justify doing the same elsewhere. In 1944, the OSS expanded its toolkit and opened a question it never fully closed. In 1945, the war ended and Washington shifted fast from emergency mode to demobilization. President Harry Truman looked at the OSS as a wartime tool, not a permanent fixture, so he dissolved it. The change came abruptly. Offices closed, projects stopped, and personnel scattered across the government or back into civilian life. Just as important, the OSS's files and networks were broken up, like a machine taken apart while it still ran. That decision solved one problem and created another. The United States still needed information about a dangerous world, but now it lacked a single place to collect it, compare it, and act on it. The Army, the Navy, the State Department, and the FBI all held pieces, but no one held the whole picture. Valuable leads went cold, foreign contacts drifted away. What had been learned in hard missions overseas risked being lost in paperwork and rivalries. And a bigger question pressed in. Should a democracy keep a secret intelligence service in peacetime at all? Many feared a permanent spy agency would become unaccountable or start shaping policy instead of informing it. Others feared the opposite, that without a standing capability, the country would be blind and surprised again. Truman's order did not end American intelligence. It forced a choice: build something new or accept the cost of going without. In 1946, the United States tried to solve a problem it had created for itself. The war ended, the old wartime service disappeared, and the government still needed answers, fast, reliable answers about a world that was already shifting. So a new body appeared, the Central Intelligence Group, or CIG. It did not replace the Army, the Navy, or the diplomats. It sat above them, in theory, to pull scattered reports into one national picture. The CIG's job sounded simple: coordinate. In practice, it meant persuading powerful agencies to share what they knew and to accept someone else deciding what mattered most. That ran straight into rivalry. Each department protected its sources, its methods, and its status. The CIG could request information, but it lacked the clear authority to command it. It could warn of gaps and duplications, yet it could not easily fix them. Coordination became negotiation, day after day. Still, the CIG marked a turning point. For the first time, intelligence was treated as a national function that needed a permanent center, not a temporary wartime trick. Analysts tried to blend military reports with diplomatic cables and other fragments into something leaders could actually use, but the rules stayed hazy, and the boundaries stayed contested. The country had taken its first step toward a standing intelligence system, while also proving how hard it was to build one inside a divided bureaucracy. In 1947, Washington no longer treated intelligence as a temporary wartime tool. The Cold War pressure rose, and the government wanted a cleaner, stronger system than the shaky coordination of the CIG. Congress passed the National Security Act. It reorganized how the country defended itself, and inside that new structure, it created a new agency, the Central Intelligence Agency. For the first time, a centralized civilian intelligence service became permanent by law. The CIA did not simply inherit desks and files. It inherited a mission. It was meant to pull information from across the government, combine it, and deliver a single picture to national leaders. That sounded straightforward, but the law also drew boundaries in a careful way. It avoided giving the CIA police powers at home, and it did not openly describe a secret action arm. The public promise stayed simple. Intelligence, not interference. Then the key phrase appeared, almost like a legal footnote with a long shadow. The act allowed the CIA to perform other functions and duties related to national security, as directed by top officials. Those words sounded harmless, even boring. They were not. They created flexibility without clarity, authority without a clear public map. The CIA gained room to act in secret, and that opening planted the seeds for covert action as a regular tool of US policy. By 1948, the Cold War had pushed Washington past a simple question of what the enemy knew. Leaders wanted tools to change what the enemy could do. That meant moving from reports to results. A new order began to take shape through the National Security Council, the White House body that set broad security policy. Its directives did not just ask for better intelligence, they asked for action that stayed officially invisible. NSC 10-2 laid it out in plain, bureaucratic language. The US now authorized covert operations, propaganda, political warfare, sabotage, and support to resistance groups, so long as American responsibility could be denied. That sentence changed the mission. The CIA no longer sat only as a collector and analyst. It became a tool for intervention, built to operate in the gray zone between peace and open war, with success measured by outcomes, not headlines. To run this new kind of work, officials created the Office of Policy Coordination. It coordinated influence and disruption campaigns across countries, drawing on the CIA's access while reaching for its own network and resources. Authority blurred fast. Multiple parts of the US government wanted a hand on the wheel, yet none wanted fingerprints on the door. From that point, covert action stopped being an improvisation. It became a standing function with staff, budget, and momentum. In the early 1950s, the Cold War stopped feeling distant and started driving emergencies, one after another. Fear of Soviet expansion pushed Washington to spend more, faster, and with fewer questions. The CIA's budget swelled, and so did its reach. More stations opened overseas. More officers rotated through sensitive posts. Covert action and intelligence collection no longer looked like special projects. They looked like standing missions. With that growth came a sharper obsession inside the agency, the idea that the enemy already sat within its own ranks. Counterintelligence hunts turned aggressive. Careers rose and fell on suspicion, rumor, and scattered fragments of evidence. The search for moles and leaks consumed time and trust, and it encouraged secrecy even inside the CIA. The agency expanded, but it also tightened inward. The threat did not just feel external, it felt personal. At the same time, leaders worried about a different kind of battlefield, the human mind. Reports of communist brainwashing during the Korean War pushed officials toward experiments that promised control, resistance, or interrogation breakthroughs. That path led into early mind control research and, soon, a program called MKUltra. It funded testing of drugs and other methods, often under weak safeguards. The CIA chased an edge that sounded scientific, the results turned controversial, and the damage lasted. By the time the Cold War hardened, the United States no longer treated intelligence as a temporary wartime tool. It operated as a permanent machine, funded year after year, staffed by career professionals and wired into military planning and foreign policy. That permanence changed the stakes. Secrets stopped being short-term advantages and became a standing condition of government. The system kept expanding because threats kept shifting and because the machinery already existed to respond. But that modern structure carried an older tension inside it. In 1942, the OSS started as an improvisation, built fast because there was no time to build it neatly. Rules came later. Lines of authority stayed blurry. Success often depended on speed, compartmentalization, and silence. Those habits made sense in a war emergency. Yet as intelligence became a lasting institution, the habits stayed. Secrecy became a default setting, not an exception reserved for the battlefield. That was where oversight debates kept colliding with practice. Elected officials demanded accountability, but intelligence work depended on hiding sources, methods, and sometimes even objectives. Every new program revived the same argument. How much could be revealed without breaking what it tried to protect? In the end, today's disputes did not come from nowhere. They followed a straight line back to 1942, when an experiment proved useful and then refused to disappear.